hosted for him, and Bill invited me to go out to his house. So I went and had a few drinks with Bill, went out and had dinner with him. Got to go to Willet back when they had all these single barrel picks out on the shelf, trying to talk people into buying them. So it was really an incredible experience. And when I got that first barrel tasting with Jim Rutledge, I just couldn't believe the variance from one barrel to another. And I tell people, until you really experience it side by side, you just can't imagine the characteristics and the layers from one barrel to another. And I was hooked after that. So that was barrel number one. The next decade, I picked out more than 400 barrels. And again, for me, it was more than just the whiskey. It was the people, the place, traveling to Kentucky. When you go through a rick house, Wild Turkey, and you think about, Jimmy Russell walking that same quarter, right, tasting barrels, spitting whiskey out through the floor, and Eddie, and now Bruce. Same thing at, being up at Beam with Booker No and Freddie, and now Freddie Jr. To me, it was just incredible to be there and be part of this history, and to see how much the early people in whiskey, what they did for the industry, and to make this America's native spirit and promote it all over the world was something really special to me. So again, picked up more than 400 barrels in 2021. Jennifer and I started KLuke. We first products got bottled at Bardstown Bourbon Company. They do all of our bottling, all of our rebarreling for us. First products hit the shelf in July of 22. We bottled in June 30th of 22. Started off just in Mississippi, which is our home state where we live. And we've now expanded to 6 different states, a couple online retailers. But the focus is always the same. I don't want to distill, I could never distill better than the legendary people we buy whiskey from. I look at it more like being a chef. Buy the best ingredients and then blend them to a heightened experience. And for us, because we source from so many different distilleries, we're up to 8 different distilleries, different ages, different mash bills. The most important thing for us is what you end up with in the glass, right? Because at the end of the day, it's really all that matters. It doesn't matter what any critic tells you, what the price point is, how limited it is. If you don't like it, it doesn't make a difference. I think one of the other special things about, whiskey, unlike wine, because we drink a lot of wine too, if you open up a $100 bottle of wine, it's a one-night experience for the most part. You might be able to go to day number 2, but it's going to start tail off pretty quick. With bourbon and whiskey, it's really, as long as you don't drink through that bottle, it's going to last as long as you can hang on to it, which is really, I think, something really special because, some days you want something mild, you might want to have a low-proof wheated bourbon. Some days you want something big and bold, you might lean toward a rye-heavy bourbon or, maybe rye, barrel strength. Some days you want to have a cocktail. So with bourbon, you have all these different opportunities out of the same bottle rather than just a one-evening experience. So how do we come up with, the blends? How do we put together what you end up with in the bottle? So kind of the legal background behind KLuke, everything we do is only sourced from Kentucky and Indiana. And that's just personal preference. We believe that those 2 areas have whiskeys that marry together really well. They have their own independent flavors, but they don't overwhelm each other. So only Kentucky and Indiana. Everything is a high rye, low rye blend. If people ask, well, what does that mean? So kind of going back to that barrel number 1, I picked Four Roses. My personal favorite bourbon the past decade has always been Four Roses Small Batch Limited Edition. And what I loved about that bourbon, what always stood out to me was combination, high rye, low rye, different yeast strains, mash bills. You get a lot of complexity, right? A lot of layers to it, a lot of excitement in every pour. And that's how we blend KLuke. We want to offer the same thing. And we're able to, have different yeast strains and mash bills by sourcing from all these different great distilleries. And then how do we build the blends? So we own hundreds of barrels from all different places. I take notes on every barrel that we own. I break them all down by category, right? Are they fruit driven? Are they more, caramel, toffee, chocolate? Are they more spice driven? And then from there further, it's like, okay, well, if it's fruit driven, is it fresh fruit? Is it more bright? Is it more baked fruit? So when I go to create a blend, I'm like, okay, we kind of know here's the end vision of where we want to be. How do we get there? What's the path? Every batch we do is solely done by taste. So I'll sit down with, 80, 90 barrel samples that are ready to be worked with. And then I start going through, I'm like, okay, what makes sense in my tasting notes and on paper to end up to this blend? And how do we get there? So I'll create maybe a dozen blends. Jennifer and I start blind tasting through them. We don't discuss them. Each of us take our own notes, and then we go, okay, well, what did you like about batch 1? What did I like? We go through, taste each one of them on the samples. If both of us like it, it moves on to the next round. If Jennifer likes something and I don't like it, it's like, okay, what did you like that I thought was lacking? Go back, find one barrel, blend it in. We go through that process for probably a month or so, get our top 3 choices. And then from there, it's like, okay, what are the bourbons people excited about in the market, right? What are the things that are kind of in our wheelhouse flavor-wise? Again, we love bourbon too. We run those blind against KLuke, and if we don't win, it's like, okay, what did this other bourbon offer that we were lacking? Do we need more fruit? Do we need more back end? Do we need mouthfeel, spice? we reblend, we retaste. So it takes us about 3 months to really hone in the right blend. Because we don't want KLuke to be good, we want it to be great. We want it to be something really special that you can take and share with your friends. So kind of going from left to right in your glasses there, you're going to start off with our brand new. So this is our batch 11 small batch barrel strength. So anytime you see the silver label, that's that bourbon. That's our core bourbon. That's our flagship. I don't know if anyone's had bourbon yet today. It's a little early in the morning, but I recommend having a small sip. Kind of sets your palate. I always tell people, whether it's 90 proof or 140, you kind of have to have one sip to kind of set your palate, and then the continual sips, you can kind of focus in on aromatics and flavor profile. So batch 11 just came out this week. We just got to Louisiana on Monday to our distributor, and they started shipping it out this week. It's available on steel box and shared pour, and starting to slowly trickle into the other states that we're available in. So I'm going to taste along with you, and if you want, we'll talk about this in a little bit, and then we'll kind of move down the portfolio here and see what you guys think.
Do you use multiple distributors, or is it just one that you utilize?
So pretty much every state has their own distributor.
Okay.
We mostly focus on small family-owned distributors, people that are really excited to have us in their portfolio, that love to tell the story. There's tons of distributors out there, so it's trying to find the right partnership for us.
Right.
Because we look at everything as find the right long-term partnership, right? Us with our distributor, the distributor with their retail accounts and restaurants. We're accessible 24 hours a day to reach out to you with questions people have, and really want to make sure we get in the right places and people that can tell the story and kind of share the passion of what we do and why we blend the way that we do. So that's batch 11. So again, high rye, low rye blend. We typically run a 10 barrel blend. 70-80% of the barrels are low rye and a couple of high rye barrels. Really the goal is to have, nice red fruit, have that caramel toffee richness, to have some spice in the back end that extends out to finish but doesn't overwhelm the whiskey. Again, looking at kind of chef's perspective, you want to have the right amount of salt and the right amount of cream and the right amount of acidity. And if you get a really good dish, why do you go back to your favorite restaurant? Because what that culinary team does, even though it's different dishes, is always exceptional. It's always well put together, and you trust them. That's the same way we look at KLuke, the blends, is to have something really multi-layered and exciting for you.
What do you consider, I think you said when it's time to blend, you have 80 to 90 barrels that are ready to be worked with. What do you all consider ready to be worked with?
So really kind of looking at flavor profiles, so I'm like, all right, well, I need to have so many that are more fruit driven, some that are more like that kind of caramel toffee chocolate, some that are, spice driven. So I kind of go through all of our notes and look at different ages, different mash bills, try to pull from all different categories and say, okay, this is kind of where I want to start with. As you know, it's a long process, right? When you're trying to, my career picking single barrels was far easier, right? I would taste through the whiskeys, analyze them. So say like 4 roses, 10 whiskeys, I'd go through them all, smell them, taste them. So okay, 1 or 2 automatically wouldn't speak out to me. Not that they were bad, just wasn't what I was looking for. Eliminate those. Then I'm like, okay, well, if these are more fruit driven, maybe these are spicier. I kind of put those against each other and try to just keep narrowing it down. We do the same thing with the blends. I'm like, okay, we need to have all these different components, but how do you? I mean, it takes forever, right? I don't know how you could sit and spend an afternoon and be like, oh yeah, we put this together. I'm like, I don't know how it's possible. Also for us, people ask, how do we scale up the operation? I don't really know the answer to that either. We're at 10 barrels. We sold our retail store about 14 months ago to focus on this full time now, because it takes us, every bit of the day. I taste pretty much 6 days a week. And then Jennifer wants to taste when I have, blends I'm excited about. She said, okay, when you're ready, you put some together, you're excited, then I'll kind of step in and give you my perspective. Quality control for sure.
Science research.
And
Science.
equally important to that, Jennifer runs all the financial logistics, spreadsheets. I love to be out in front of people. I love to talk about whiskey and taste. Jennifer loves to sit in front of the computer and make sure everything operates that way, which thank goodness, because we'd be in all sort of trouble if I had to do that too.
The strength behind the scenes.
For sure. Keeps me in line. I'm like, hey, we could do this. And she's like, yeah, that's great. Remember, you already said you were going to do this. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to do this in this date. She's like, did you look at the calendar? Because you already have this. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. So Jennifer's in charge of all logistics, making sure we get paid for everybody, make sure we pay everybody. But also, she's created spreadsheets for me on all the data. So I have all my handwritten notes in a electronic tablet. But then when I want to look at, going back to how do we narrow down the barrels, it's like, okay, well, I pull up the spreadsheet, everything's broken down by age, where the barrels are stored at, what is the rye content, mash bills, when did I last have samples pulled? Everything I want to know, Jennifer has a spreadsheet for me so I can go pull all that data, just to make sure we're really honing in on the best of what we can do on the products that we own. So this is batch 11, so I said brand new. Any thoughts or feedback on what you guys think of the first? Oh, yes, sir.
So which whiskeys made by other distillers did you use as the blinds against this one that you were considering?
It's a pretty wide spectrum. So we really look at what are the best bourbons in the market people are excited about, right? Things like, Booker's and Old Carter, Four Roses, Small Batch LE. I mean, all these other great bourbons that have come before us, things that we personally enjoy. But we run, it's a lot of rounds of blind tasting, and batch 11 especially. We run against our own as well. We were really having a hard time with this one. We were down between two blends, and I finally told Jennifer, I said, we gotta make a decision here. One kept winning, then the other one, we kept going back and forth. Finally, I said, you know what I want to do? I want you just to pull out rounds of whiskey and blinds, and I'm just going to stand in the kitchen, just taste them, spit them out, just like I would be in a rick house. Just kind of go through them. Just focus on what is exciting on the palate, and not try to be so dialed into, because you get inside your own head and trying to think about it, and as we go on more and more time, I feel more pressure, right, to try to make sure that the new batch is just exciting, if not better than the previous. I guess I shouldn't say better, but layers of complexity is really what it's more about. Does it have the layers? Does it have the, upfront aromatics on the nose, upfront palate, mid palate, back end, long finish? So, it gets more stress for me as we go on too, as we create more and more blends that people are excited about, right? You see, someone like Fred Minnick could say, well, this is going on the top 25 and the top 100, Damon back here, who VA Bourbon Hunter, big fan, has reviewed a lot of our whiskeys. So it's like trying to make sure we can consistently deliver for you guys, because at the end of the day, all of us love bourbon. We want to make sure we have a consistent product for you. So we go through tons of rounds of blind tasting. Probably like many of you, we have hundreds of bottles at our home, maybe thousands, I'm not real sure anymore. Considering I picked more than 400 barrels, we've got a pretty good depth of whiskey. Yes, sir.
So being such a small craft distillery or blender, I'm assuming you have stuff that you said you're going through tasting. It's like, okay, this isn't working. So do you let the other stuff just age longer to see maybe in a year or so if you're now going to use that blend, or if it's matured, and now that's something you want to put out?
Everything will leave it by the barrel. So if we taste, I taste it all the time. It's like, maybe this is going through a period where it's kind of shut down. We want to come back and retaste in 3 months or 6 months.
Okay.
I'll mark it on the spreadsheet when we kind of want to go back and retaste it again, and we'll go back and revisit it.
Okay.
Kind of the beautiful thing about whiskey, there's so many different taste profiles, and then also, not every whiskey is meant for every blend, because there's certain times we need something bigger. Like in batch 8, when we're working on those, it just needed something on the back end. So I had some barrels we'd put aside, a certain lot of 10-year-old Kentucky bourbons that we had flagged to be single barrels. Like, well, let me play around with some of these, and they kind of gave us the back end depth that we needed in that particular batch and blend. So one of the really neat things about what we do in KLuke, because we're not locked into a certain age, a certain mash bill, a certain distillery, it's all done by taste. So it gives us such a wide canvas we can work with. And that was something really important. We didn't want to be locked into any certain specific. Legality wise, it's got to be over 4 years old, which, everything's far older than that in the blends. Only Kentucky, Indiana, and then no more than 36% rye. So we really wanted to leave it, pretty wide open based on flavor profile. Or we could say, sometimes we're tasting a blend that's like, yeah, I've got these really nice, 6-year bourbons. We've got some great brightness. Let's play with one of those. And some days it's like, maybe we need something in the double-digit age range to give us that depth to it and big back end roundness. We just didn't want to be locked into any certain, because one thing I've learned over the last, decade plus of tasting whiskey, older's not always better. High proof's not always better. Certain mash bill's not always better. It's really about honing in on the right barrels, and then when you start blending them, it's a whole nother. It's a whole nother world, of how the whiskeys blend together, and how they play together. Kind of early on, kind of my first foray probably into blending, working with Chris Morris over at Woodford Reserve, which was just a 2-barrel blend, and I couldn't believe when you started playing around with like barrel A and barrel C. It's like, wow, I don't taste anything I got in barrel A by itself when I blend these two together. Maybe barrel B I didn't really love, but when I blend it with barrel C, all of a sudden it's bright and it's heightened. And I think that was kind of my first foray. Doing some of the stuff in Maker's Mark early on. Bill Samuels invited me to be one of the first people outside of Kentucky to do those secondary stave-aged Maker's picks, which it blew me away, like how one stave, how much you could change the blend. I was there for, I don't know, like 6 hours the first time, because I just trying to get it right, trying to find the right balance of flavor to it. So I can tell you, blending is far more difficult than it is picking out single barrels, because there's so much more that goes into it. And again, that's why we spend so much time tasting through them. It's just want to make sure it's something special for you. Proof. Another thing, proof. People always ask, what kind of proof are we looking for in KLuke? We don't care. It's all about flavor. So we don't really look at proof when I'm creating the blends. But as we taste through them, naturally it kind of lands in that 115 plus or minus a few points. Everything's been 115 to 120, but that's kind of our sweet spot. When I was at Four Roses picking barrels, I was talking to Brent yesterday. Tier 3, almost always I pick tier 3 because it was right in that sweet spot of that 112 to 117 proof wise, which just for me is kind of what speaks to me. It's what I enjoy. When I used to pick barrels at Heaven Hill, I used to always tell them, for the most part, I knew I was going to pick the youngest one, which is usually around 9 years, and usually the lowest proof, which is still in the 120s. But it's all about what you like. And in all 400 plus barrels I picked, I never went back and changed my mind based off knowing the stats afterward. I always picked everything blind because I just didn't care about, all I cared about was how was it in the glass, right? I don't care the age, how limited it was, how rare it was. Because for me, if you don't pick it based off what speaks to you, it doesn't do anybody any good, and people used to always ask when I was picking out barrels, well, who else comes with you? Who else is on the team? I'm like, it's basically just me. I mean, Jeffrey made some trips up there with me, and a few times I had a few friends or distributors, but at the end of the day, if I was going to put my name on the bottle, it had to be something, if I could go home and it was the last bourbon I got to drink, that's how I looked at every barrel pick, and that's how we blend KLuke as well. If we don't get to drink anything else, if this is it, it's got to be to that standard for us. The complexity's there in the layers. So this one, batch 11, came in at 120 proof even. So everything is bottled, non-chill filtered. This is a 10 barrel blend. We typically get between 1,600 and 1,800 bottles in each blend, just based off angel share and the yield and kind of flavor profile. So when you look at 6 states and a little bit of online distribution, it doesn't really leave a whole lot to go out there in the market. So it's, people keep asking, when are we going to expand to other states? We've just kind of taken our time with it and just really, we want to make sure we don't overextend what we're doing. For us, I'm very proud to say we're an independently owned company. It's just the two of us. We have no outside investors. We haven't taken any money from anyone. There's no board. So really, at the end of the day, it comes down to what we believe is the most exciting whiskey in the blend in the glass. And we can slowly take our time and make sure we can deliver on those. Barrel strength, we bottle 3 times a year. So every 4 months, we do a new blend. And we'll go back. We'll start all over again. When I get home, I've got new barrels. I'm going to sit and taste through, rate them, and then I'll start figuring out back to square one, pulling them. Even though we won't bottle again now till late June, it'll take us that whole time to go through and work on the blend. So, but that's batch 11. So hope you guys are enjoying that one. Like I said, just starting to hit shelves here in retailers in Louisiana. And then our next product. So this is our toasted barrel bourbon. So for me, over the years of tasting through a lot of stuff, I think finished products can easily be overdone. Especially if you cut down in proof. So it's like, how do you find the right balance of flavor to be in the product? This is our batch 4, which again came out this week. Starting with batch 3, we got to start working with KLuke, which we're very excited about. We've been on the wait list for about 2 years with them, and I really like the way Kelvin does their process, and just they've got really high quality barrels. So this toasted bourbon, again, it's a 10 barrel blend. I blend them differently, knowing that we're going to finish them in toasted, because we know that's going to kind of change, right? You're going to get more. Well, let me back a little. So if you don't know the difference between charring and toasting wood, so when you char a barrel, it's real high intense heat, maybe 45 seconds. It's like cooking on a grill. I love to cook on my green egg. If you follow us on social media, you see me cooking on there all the time. Real high intense heat, it kind of cracks the wood and you get that kind of alligator skin on the barrels. When you toast the barrel, it's a small fire, it's real low and slow, and it brings out different sweeter tones from the wood. You get more like toasted marshmallow. I get a lot of like creme brulee crust, that kind of charred sugar on there. But again, when we look at it like being a chef, that should just be a seasoning component. We don't want that to overwhelm the core whiskey, because we spend too much time trying to find this beautiful layered bourbon that's got great red fruit mid palate. It's got a nice back end to it. So we want the toast to complement the whiskey but not overwhelm it. So with batch 4, 10 barrels of bourbon were refinished in 7 Kelvin cooperage barrels. 5 of those were medium toast, no additional char. 2 were heavy toast, no additional char. And the reason why I talk about not charring them anymore, we felt that when you charred the barrel, it added more wood influence, which kind of overwhelmed the whiskey a little bit. We thought just focusing on the toast brought out the sweeter tones, but didn't add more wood spice to the finished bourbon. This one we only finished for 10 weeks, so the previous batch was 3 months. This one we shortened it up a little bit. Just trying to find that right balance, again, of adding those sweeter tones, but not overwhelming the core bourbon in there.
when you start a new batch, or, you know, you're up to batch 11 now, do you start with a vision for what you want that to taste like? Or do you take opportunity to chase a market trend?
No, so for us, it's really the only vision is, you know, not only with it being great whiskey, but being layered, right? So it's like, okay, I know we want to start off with so much of each main category: fruit, richness, spice, and then just start kind of building the blends from there. And then as we taste them, I can figure out which direction we need to head more in. You know, we go more toward category A, more fruit driven, more toward richness, and more toward spice. Did it need brighter tones for aromatics or to lift the whiskey altogether? Yeah, I look at it the same way that I picked out barrels, right? At the end of the day, if hopefully you believe in what Jennifer and I taste and what we enjoy, and that's how we blend the whiskeys. I think if you start looking at any outside factors, you start to get skewed, and maybe now all of a sudden you don't pick your favorite or the best whiskey. You say, well, I think the general population would enjoy this more. But we're not going to do that and not pick the best whiskey that we believe in. You know, being a small company, you know, we're fortunate we don't have to sell hundreds of thousands of cases like the big guys, you know, the heritage distilleries. So we don't have to worry about trying to fit to the exact same slot every time. If you believe in us and you believe in the experience of what you're going to get in the bottle, that's what we're all about. So for us, that's far more important than trying to be, you know, the exact same product. Which brings me back to my earlier question, talking about a little bit that I mentioned is how do we scale up? I've talked to a lot of guys in kind of the next tier above us, and they kind of blend by or build their products based off of, you know, the same run of barrels should be about the same flavor profile. I just can't do that because for me, I know how much variance there is from one barrel to another, and I don't know how big we can scale it. It could be a 12 barrel blend, it could be 20, I mean, it could be 10, I'm not really sure until we kind of go up to each one and start working on them. But once we hit that point where we feel we can no longer blend the same experience, we're just not gonna do it anymore. We'll either add on some new batches or it'll just be what it is. You know, we don't need to, our vision is not to be in every state. We're also not building the company to be bought out. We are building it off of the belief of something exceptional in the glass. So it just gives us a lot of opportunity to really focus on the whiskey and not all these other outside factors. Obviously, when you don't have to answer to somebody else and pay back money, it's a little easier to do really what you believe in and what all of us as whiskey lovers can, just what we love, right? What's in the glass. So I don't know what the scalability is going to be at. I'm not really sure. We'll see as we keep going. But like I said, we have no desire to change anything about the process, the way we do it. So however many barrels we can get to, that's what we'll do moving forward. Do you got anybody have any questions on the toast barrel or comments on it? As far as kind of what you feel as far as the toast and the balance to it?
Do you have an age statement on the toasted?
No age statement on this one either.
Okay.
But again, there's some really well-aged whiskey in there, but we thought about putting, early on we were gonna list the mash bills and the ages, but then, you know, I just don't want people to just focus on that, right? And say, well, this batch has more of this age or this mash bill, or I think now it's probably this distillery seeing the mash bill and it's gotta be better, and kind of have a preconceived notion of how it may be before you get in the glass. Obviously it's a little bit more work and you guys have to trust us and believe in us, but like I said, we've got some amazing whiskey from all different distilleries and great depth of age. But we just felt if we focused on that, then it takes away from kind of the experience. So
I mean, I really taste the sweetness. That toasted is amazing.
Yeah.
It's great depth of flavor. Like to me, it's like a really good balance. So like the toast, the wood, and the rye, like they all just balance each other out like so well. And just, you know, hearing you say like, you know, you want to have that rye for the back end, not have it not overwhelmed. It's kind of exactly what happens. Like the rye comes in the back end, and then the sweetness in the toast kind of just levels it out, and you still feel it, you still taste it, but it's not like, oh, okay, this is I still taste it's like 10 minutes later. You know, it's like it makes you want to keep going back.
And that's a really good point, because that's something, you know, the finish, we're big into the finish, and that having that little bit of rye spice in the back end, it kind of brightens up your palate, right? It kind of excites it, especially on the toasted barrel. You know, you get that little bit of toasted marshmallow against some of that creme brulee. I think you kind of get the sweetness up front. It's got a real buttery mouthfeel to it. You get that kind of baked red fruit mid palate, and then you kind of get more of that kind of caramel cream sweetness comes back, but then you get the rye spice just starts to kind of come through and cut through the sweetness and balance it out. And then all of a sudden you have this kind of sensory thing going on in your palate where it's a balance back and forth of sweet and spicy, and then next thing you know, you're going, well, I need to take another sip, you know, and then you're like, wait a minute, how much of this bottle did I have sitting out here? But really, that for me, that's the fun of whiskey, right? When you taste it and you're like, wow, there's so much going on, it just draws you in for more. And really, that's the whole idea of what we want to do. We want you to be able to put KLuke up against any of your favorite, big name legacy brands out there, and it holds its own. Not to say better or worse, but it holds its own with your favorite bourbons. I get emails all the time from people that I meet at tastings, and I tell them all the same thing. I said, look, if you really enjoy this, and your other favorite bourbons or Booker's and Old Carter and Stag Junior and HL Barrel Proof, we'd love you to get your friends together, run a blind tasting, and let us know the results. And we get people right back all the time. We'll get 85, 90% picked, whatever batch of ours against their other favorite bourbons, which is always a lot of fun because we do the same thing. So it's always exciting to hear ours holding its own against the best bourbons in the world, which is, again, really important for us to over-deliver on the products.
So I know you said you're not looking at like what the outside trends are, what people want. You're looking for what you like.
Yes, sir.
So when you're going from batch 3 to 4, 4 to 5, when you're going from batch to batch, are you trying to mimic what you created before, or are you trying to enhance it, or is it just based on, what am I in the mood for this day or while I'm tasting?
So it's a great question. So we're never trying to make batch 11 taste like batch 10, but the goal is that every time you get a batch, you say, wow, I can see all the layers, right? The beautiful balance of all these different components, but never trying to make it exactly the same. It wouldn't be very exciting for us. We're not trying to appeal to hundreds of thousands of people, which again, if you're if you're blending Maker's Mark, right? Someone buying Maker's Mark, you want to taste exactly the same today as it did 20 years ago, and 20 years in the future, you want it to be the same. You look at something like Jim Beam White Label, right? They're going to blend over 1,000 barrels together. The same thing is if you're buying Jim Beam and that's what you drink, you want to taste exactly the same. So they're blending a huge array from different floors, different warehouses, interior, exterior barrels to make exactly the same. We're the opposite. We want to have, each batch has its own personality. And we run our own batches side by side, blind tastings all the time, and we have different favorites based off of, some days you want something a little bit softer, right? If you want something a little bit softer, maybe more fruit driven, lean maybe toward batch 3 or batch 7, those are a little bit softer, more big spice tones. I think batch 2 was kind of more big dark spice. Kind of getting in the later batches, you get a lot more like caramel toffee, dark red fruit. Yeah, I think it's just all about the experience. And we love to hear what people think too, running ours in blinds. We could probably take all of us, we could have ran batches, 8, 9, 10, 11 in a blind, and then came back the next 3 days, and I bet you as a group we wouldn't rank them in the same order back to back. But the goal is that you never hopefully taste anything of ours and say, wow, it's not balanced, it's not exciting. It doesn't always have to be your favorite of the day, but we want to, when you taste it, say, wow, there's a lot going on here. It's very enjoyable.
From a marketing standpoint too, it makes every single batch collectible, because people that love KLuke or want to go, they're going to want to go after the next batch. They're going to want to grab a couple bottles of batch 12 when that comes out, batch 13.
And what we've really seen too, in a lot of the people that really enjoy what we do is each batch has its own personality. So they're very excited to see kind of what the next one is. Which is the same thing for us. You're right. As someone who loves bourbon, it's the same thing for us. We want to be able to experience something different, but the consistent quality in every batch.
For sure.
So I said this one we do this one 3 times a year, every 4 months. The toasted bourbon we do every 6 months. So we do them in pairs. You'll see these two together. Then the next release will be these two together, and then the third release of the year will be these two together. So then our toasted barrel rye, once we dump out our bourbon out of the Kelvin barrels, we take those one-time use barrels, we age our rye in them. The reason being is, a lot of times we hear when we do tastings, people tell me I don't like rye. I'm like, okay, well, what about it don't you like? It's too spicy, it's too astringent, it's too much of a bite on the back end. Well, I had the same conversation with Jennifer. She's felt the same way. A lot of ryes, especially like, Knob Creek rye, I picked a lot of those barrels, 115 proof, but those are very, those are in your face kind of rye, right? Cinnamon, nutmeg, coriander, very big, kind of bitey rye, great in cocktails. But if you're not in the mood for that style of rye, you're probably not going to like it that particular day. You have to really want that. I picked a lot of barrels at Peerless, and picked a lot of rye barrels there. And their rye is a little more elegant. It's a little bit more floral. So we're like, okay, how can we do something along those lines with KLuke? So again, blending both from Indiana and Kentucky. From Indiana, we focus on barrels that are more citrus driven, more floral. And then from Kentucky, more of that kind of dark, rich, kind of more chocolate notes, some spice, but again, in check where it's not overwhelming. So for me in the blends on the rye, you get that beautiful kind of candied orange peel, lemon peel up front. You get a little honeysuckle, and then the back end you start to get some dark chocolate. There is a little bit of mint, but it's more like a Girl Scout cookie, like a thin mint, instead of real herbal herbaceous. just really round. And then those toasted barrels, being used one time, it doesn't overwhelm too much toast where it would cover up those more delicate notes. This is our batch 4. This came out a couple months ago. There's still a little bit out in the market, but it's all Kelvin barrels. It was half medium toast, half heavy toast. So 4 barrels of rye went into 4 Kelvin barrels. Again, we taste them independently at 2 months. We decide we want to go a little bit longer, we want to go a month longer, we'll taste them again. And then we blend them all back together for the final small batch blend.
So you only had 4 barrels that went into that
This one's
total?
only 4 barrels in this particular batch.
It tastes the sweetness.
What's the proof on that?
114 proof on this one. So batch 4 came in at 114 even. And actually, I didn't talk about the proof on toasted. This one is 118.4. So batch 3 was 118.8. So pretty close. Again, kind of in our wheelhouse of flavor profile. Any thoughts on the rye?
That's marvelous. When you
Doesn't
said
look like typical rye, right? And
when you
that's
said
kind
Thin
of-
Man,
Refreshing rye.
Yeah,
It is a refreshing
you kind
rye.
of get that candied, like I said, that citrus peel,
Yeah.
some floral.
You get that juice, fruitiness up front. And you
Dark
get-
chocolate.
Yeah, and then on the back end, you get the slight pepperiness. That's a really good rye.
So for us, it's more of a bourbon drinker's rye, right? I call it a very pretty style rye. Jennifer makes fun of me. I'm like, but it is. When you've had a lot of big, bold, Kentucky style ryes, which I think is what everyone thinks of rye, we really wanted to kind of showcase that you could have something a little bit softer, a little bit more approachable, still have some rye spice, but just be in check with all these other flavors. And again, kind of extend out to finish. I think those couple of heavy toasted barrels kind of helps accent that dark chocolate that you get from the Kentucky rye. But just something you could sit, if you're in the mood, if you're not sure if you want bourbon or rye, you could sit and drink this and be happy with it. Yes, ma'am.
So this is a rye that was in toasted barrels?
3 months finished in one-time used Kelvin barrels
Is that uncommon for other ryes to
to be
barreled
toasted.
and toasted? Yeah.
I mean, I think probably the most popular that comes to mind is Michter's. That's probably been the one everyone thinks of. Peerless now has toasted rye. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how many other toasted ryes are out there, but I think that toast really rounds out the finish on rye. Kind of takes off some of the sharp edges. But again, we didn't want to overpower the more delicate notes because when I'm looking at the blends, I'm really trying to make sure we have enough of that brighter citrus tones. And if you go with, we felt if you went brand new toasted, it was just going to overwhelm that. And you'd still probably get more of the Kentucky focus, but you'd lose out more of those more kind of beautiful, delicate notes that are up front. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you got your, or you got a large portion of your rye from Peerless.
Well, I picked a lot of barrels. So before I started KLuke, I picked out 10 barrels from Peerless. I picked out more barrels than anyone else in the country at the time, just because I love the profile of what they were doing, especially on their ryes. Again, kind of being a little bit softer.
Isn't your rye's from a different source than what most,
They run a lower rye percentage in their mash bills.
I was thinking, we were at their distillery in January when we went through the tour. I thought they said something about their source of the rye itself was a little different than a lot of the others.
Probably because they focus so much on small family everything. They also use Kelvin barrels. That's kind of part of where I really started to kind of dialing into Kelvin. There's some other projects out there that used Kelvin that I really like the flavor profile. But again, Peerless very small, very hands-on, which I love about the bourbon industry. Right, there's so many amazing people out there, and when you get to go see the operations, if you haven't been to Kentucky, I highly recommend going. When you go see the scale, it's unbelievable. Way back in the day, I was going to pick out a Jack Daniel's single barrel for an owner of a casino in Biloxi. And the guy that came with me, the general manager, I said, look, I want to show you kind of the difference in scale. So we went to Jack Daniel's, and then we went to Belle Meade. And to see the scale difference, he's like, this is unbelievable in the same day to see like how wildly different the scale was. And it's pretty amazing when you go up and you see like the volume. You got distilleries laying down, I mean, the hundreds of barrels, thousands of barrels. I was at Beam one time and I asked a question about corn, and this is probably 8 years ago, and they're like, yeah, we go through about 200 acres of corn a day. And I'm like, so you look at how fast some of those bottling lines, if you go to like Heaven Hill and you're watching them run, they're running, hundreds of bottles a minute on the bottling line. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And for us, again, we're at Bardstown Bourbon Company, who we're very proud to be able to bottle there. They have the most state-of-the-art equipment, incredible team of people that have been in all facets of the bourbon industry. And we go there and we watch bottling. We go watch our live bottling, and at the same time, they're running 4 bottling lines in there, and they've got one, high-speed line they're running. And it's just incredible to see the scale difference, even there at Bardstown. And I'm not sure now. They're probably bottling for 35, 40 different people right now. But it's really amazing to go see. if you've never been to a palletized barrel warehouse, years ago I was at Barton and they said, hey, do you want to go see one of the big warehouses that are palletized? And I said, yeah, I've never been to one. I'd love to see it. And I think it was a 60 or 80,000 barrel warehouse. And the guy's like, just walk down, and when the lights come on, the crossroads, just tell me what you think. And I'm walking down, the lights are clicking on, and all of a sudden I get to a crossroads, and every direction it just fades off barrels into the darkness. And it was the coolest thing, like, to go and see. Just how many barrels are laid down in Kentucky. Like I said, there's more barrels than people up there. When you go and you can see it and see the process, it's pretty special to go and to think 100 years ago, kind of the vision to make bourbon the native spirit of America, and where we come now, something pretty special. So,
Do you have more recent place that you barrel from?
So I sold the store 14 months ago, so I haven't done any more barrel picks, from other places. I've been very fortunate that pretty much every master distiller you've seen here at this event, I've gotten to pick barrels with over the years. So it's, it's really special for me. We have a room at home. It's a wine cellar on one side and a whiskey bar on the other side of it. And I've got hanging up with the barrel head. So barrel number 100. So barrel 1 was 4 roses. Barrel 100 was 4 roses. And then I've got barrel 200, 300, 400, all the barrel heads hung up on the wall. And then just a couple other special ones. One from Fred Johnson, me and Jennifer, they were picking a Blanton's barrel years ago. And I've got the first Willet barrel I picked with Drew back in the day. And one from Bill Samuels, who early on, and just been a really, really special career for me to get to spend so much time with these people. And again, I think it's as important as the whiskey is, it's also the people and the place and the history. And there's so much of it up there when you go and you experience. People don't realize when you think about all the hardships of bourbon, during coming off Prohibition when nobody wanted to drink it. I was talking to Jimmy Russell, and he said he spent 20 years on the road and just kept handing people a glass of Turkey 101, kept saying, look, just keep drinking it, you'll grow to like it. 20 years, that's a long time to sit and try to get someone to love what you're doing, what you put your whole, your family's beliefs into. Of course, nowadays it's not like that at all, but it was a long, hard road to kind of get to this point. And I think there's so much depth out there of whiskey and things you can enjoy and have a good time with. And I say when you go see the process, for the most part, there's not really good and bad whiskey. It's whiskey that speaks to you, though. It's about finding what you enjoy, right? Whether it's a certain mash bill or certain age or finish or just, for me, people always ask, well, what do you drink at home? Well, obviously we drink a lot of KLuke, but we still drink, love 4 Roses, love Wild Turkey. What am I in the mood for? That's really what it comes down to. Same with Jennifer. I'm like, what do you want to have? And she's like, well, I think I'm feeling more, maybe something more fruit driven, or maybe give me something big and bold. Do you want to have it neat over a cube of ice? People talk about you can't add water to whiskey, you're going to ruin it. I'm like, all you're doing is lowering the proof, or opening it up, letting it, letting all these flavors evolve and develop in the glass. For all of us that live down here in the South, it's super hot in the summertime. I'm a year-round bourbon drinker. I don't believe in switching to clear spirits, So I'll drink KLuke, I'll drink a double over a big cube of ice, sit out there and cook on my green egg, and just enjoy the experience. When friends come over, people come in town that have never been by the house, what do you want to drink? Of course, we say, I don't care. I'm like, well, just name some things you've never had. We'll pull down stuff off the shelf and sit and share it and have a good time with it. Because for me, that's what whiskey is all about. All of us have special bottles, but you gotta crack them open and enjoy them. I know nobody wants the good bottles to go away, but it's way more fun to share the stories about experiencing the bottles than just looking at them sealed on the shelf. I've got special stuff like Booker's Rye. When that came out, it's when Lucas was being born, our son. So I got a bottle of that to have, drink that on special occasions, but I share it with friends. My most prized bottle is that 1979 Wild Turkey that my dad gave when I turned 21, and him and I have drank that over the years to celebrate special occasions. And again, I think that's what's really, really fun about whiskey. It's not a one-time deal. You could sit and experience it over and over again, share it with people, and just have a good time with it. So that's what whiskey's all about. Does anybody have any other questions for me on the brand? Yes, ma'am.
Just curious, so why have you chosen to go only rye? Why no wheated bourbon?
So I would love to have a wheated bourbon in our portfolio. I just have not been able to find the age. So for us, we really want to have both Kentucky and Indiana. I just haven't been able to find the right quality sources that we consistently get to put something out as much as I would love to. So hopefully at some point down the future we'll get a chance to do it.
People have prejudices. I just wondered, maybe you don't like wheated.
No, I'm an equal opportunity whiskey drinker. Also, you'll see a couple other labels on occasion of us. We have the Keenan Cabernet. We'll pour that tonight at the booth. We'll have it kind of off to the side. But that was a special project. So Michael Keenan is a longtime friend in the wine industry. They're on their third generation. His son is now heavily involved in the winery. Michael took it over from his dad. They've been there 50 years. It's a small winery up on Spring Mountain. I reached out to Michael a couple years ago. I said, Michael, we really want to do a wine barrel finished bourbon. And Michael said, great, what do you need? I said, well, we love reserve cab. We want to do the same thing, half French oak, half American oak barrels, just like you do in the wine. He said, no problem. I said, okay, great. Well, while we're on the subject, whatever we need, can I use your name and logo on the label? He said, sure. And I was like, well, Michael, what if I screw it up? You know, it's your family. It's 50 years. He said, you own it. I've known you forever. So we got to this really special blend. And I'm like, how do we create the right blend to go in these wine barrels and not overpower it, right? How do we find the balance? The only thing I know how to do is do it by taste. So I create, a bunch of blends. We blended a little bit of his reserve Cabernet in there. We let them oxidize, trying to mimic where it would be 6 months down the road in barrel. Jennifer and I blind tasted through all those, found our favorite, called the blend in, sent it to Bardstown, had the wine barrel shipped there, filled it, and then we tasted it after 3 months every month. The first one went a full year. The second one, which we'll be pouring tonight, went 8 months in those wine barrels. And again, just something fun, kind of showcasing how you can find the right characteristics. A lot of people don't like wine barrel finishes because it overwhelms the whiskey. You cut it proof, all you taste is wine. You don't get any true bourbon flavors. We wanted to have, still have that caramel and toffee and spice. I know Demonge got a chance to try it, I think maybe last week.
That's great.
We were talking a little bit about yesterday, trying to find that right elegance, in the blend in there. And then if you saw the blue labels, if anybody was down here for the Super Bowl, the event I was out with Fred Minnick, we do a couple of single barrels every now and then. We've only released 6 or 7 so far. We had a couple of exclusively for Louisiana, Fred Minnick 9-year single barrel picks that we did. And then if you follow us online, if you've seen all the TTB labels recently popping up for KLuke, we have a barrel program coming on board. It's going to start in May. Very select retailers around the country. But we've laid down old world finishes, so Cognac, Armagnac, Sauterne, PX, Pedro Jimenez, Sherry. And we're going to start, so our barrel pick program will be a new label. You'll see kind of a maroon color, and then we also have a rye. We'll be finished secondary casks. Store owners and restaurants get a chance to come out, taste through those, pick their favorite, and buy a whole single barrel. They'll be very limited. The first round, like if say a store here in New Orleans picks, Cognac cask, it'll be the only one in the country at the time. So we only have one of each one laid down, in either bourbon or rye. We recently had some 12-year-old rye labels get approved on TTV, if you saw that. So we've got some other fun things coming down the line. It's just all about finding the right expression and experience. But blending is really kind of our true passion. So even like the single barrel selections from accounts that are going to pick them, we created the blend specifically to go in those barrels, and then they'll get to pick that single barrel, but it'll still have all the characteristics of KLuke, Kentucky, Indiana, high rye, low rye, just accented by those secondary barrel finishes. And again, the goal is to not overwhelm them. So we're looking, 3.5 to 4.5 months secondary finish on those to try to have that just right balance of flavor of bourbon in the secondary cask without overdoing it.
Any plans for brick and mortar?
No, I thought no brick and mortar. Doing it for 20 years, which I absolutely love. The only thing that I miss about brick and mortar was getting to see people every day and get to talk to them. But it's the retail world's a tough 80. I worked 80 hours a week for 20 years. Jennifer worked full time for a long time too before she took over all the important things for the business, even on this retail side. But with Caitlin being 12 and Luke's being 7, it's really nice to be able to be home. Still get to go out and travel. I travel quite a bit, but trying to find that right balance, be able to enjoy time being home with the family and being out on the road. So I kept trying to tell my dad I'd send him up to Kentucky. He had his hip surgery and had his promise, I'll get you a scooter just like Jimmy. You can go up there and sell bottles. And he's like, if I leave here, I'm going somewhere tropical. I'm not going to Kentucky. So couldn't talk him into it, but. We are available in Bardstown Bourbon's gift shop, which is something pretty cool. Be able to be up there, and then they also have our offerings behind the bar. So the states we're in Alabama. As a matter of fact, today was their limited quarter release. They released the new batch of KLuke today. Mississippi, Louisiana, Kentucky, Wyoming, Tennessee, and then online through Sealbox and Shared Pour. For anyone who doesn't live down here, lives in a state we're not distributed in yet.
Okay, Wyoming.
I know that's it. Jennifer said the same thing. Why are we going to Wyoming? So a guy from a retail store in Wyoming flew down to meet me when I still had my store, and he said, "Look, we got to have KLuke in Wyoming." I was like, "I got to be honest, man. I'm not traveling to Wyoming." He's like, "You don't have to. I love what you're doing. I'll take minimum 10 cases of every release in my store." Wyoming, there's no distributors, no brokers. It's an easy process. I'm like, it can't be that easy, right? Dealing with all the states. Jennifer does all the compliance, and nothing's ever easy. And he's like, they're gonna call you next week from the state of Wyoming, they'll talk to you, and then we'll put an order in. So they called me and they told me, and I was like, it can't be. I called our attorney, and he's like, it can't be that easy. So he called him, they told him the same thing, and so off we went to Wyoming. So we just, he had our product exclusively for a year at a store called Country Lane Liquor, and we just expanded to, I think we're in 3 or 4 other stores, and then we had to cut them off because it was too many cases. We couldn't afford to send any more up there this last go around. So now we're kind of in the corners of the state of Wyoming. But yeah, so that's how we got to Wyoming. I know it's kind of way outside the realm of all the rest of our southern states that I can travel to easy. Next state we're looking at for distribution is going to be Texas. We've had a lot of interest the last 2 years, and just started talking with the distributor over there. Hoping to finalize that next week. So Texas should be the next state. But it's really nice, having sealed box and shared pour. We do some stuff with Taste Select Repeat. They're able to ship to about 40 states, which is great because it gives us an opportunity to get out there. And for me to still be able to be home with the family some and focus on the blending. Like I said, these larger batches take forever. I'll go tell her, I'm like, hey, we should do this. And she's like, when do you think you're going to fit that in time-wise? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, probably right. That's why you're in charge of all the logistics. But I love being out, in tastings, being out in front of people. I love sharing my passion and history, and I love sharing pours of other brands with people. Because again, I think when you get whiskey in front of you, nothing else really matters, right? Nobody cares about anything else. I think the problem is the world. You can really just sit and focus and have great conversation with people on what's in the glass. And it's always fun to hear what somebody else pulls out tasting note wise out of the whiskeys than you. Because you're like, you know what? That's exactly right. I tasted that flavor, but I couldn't place it with it. Now that you said it, now I can see that in this glass. And I think when you taste in small groups of friends, it's really special. That's why I started off studying wine. We kind of broke up into small groups and honed in on what do you taste, what do I taste, right? And trying to have that memory recall to experiences and places. Wine people especially describe all sorts of weird things, they taste and smell. People always ask, what's minerality? We talk about minerality in wine, like old German wine. And I'm like, okay, well, how do you explain mineral to somebody? And the way I always explain it is if you're playing miniature golf, and especially down here in the South where it's hot, and you're in one of those caves and like the water hitting the rock and you kind of smell like that limestone, that kind of wet rock, to me that's minerality. Like that's the place that takes me back when I think of minerality. And half the people go, oh, I know exactly what you mean. The other half go, how much have you had to drink? I have no idea what you're talking about. Right? But it's all about experience and recall and putting together time and place. And a lot of times people associate, a certain special occasion, like, hey, this bottle, I had it, with my dad, or I had it with my wife or a group of friends. And I just remember kind of the experience even more than what the whiskey tasted like or the wine. It's just about having the opportunity to be there with that group of people. Which again, I think kind of brings us back to what makes this so special. So, any other questions from anyone? Well, we appreciate you for enjoying what we do. If you've never had our products, taking the time to hear about them. If you come by our table tonight, we'll be pouring all these. Behind the table, we'll have that Keenan Cab Reserve. We've also got both the Fred Minnick single barrel picks. If you'd like to try those, like I said, they were Louisiana exclusive. They didn't last, like a half a day on the market. Just if you want to try a couple single barrels from us. And we appreciate you coming to hear what we do and hear about KLuke. So thank you so much.
Thank you.